As the air turns crisp and the holidays draw near, comfort becomes the best gift of all. Quince delivers layers that last, sweaters, outerwear, and everyday essentials that feel luxurious, look timeless, and make holiday dressing and gifting effortless. Quince seriously has it all. $50 Mongolian cashmere sweaters made for everyday wear, denim that never goes out of style, silk tops and skirts that add polish, and down outerwear built to take on the season. Perfect for gifting or upgrading your own wardrobe. You know what is at the top of my list? Quince's Italian wool coats. And the Mongolian cashmere dress, I pair it with black riding boots. And the holiday gift this season, gold everyday hoops for everybody in your life. By working directly with ethical, top-tier factories, Quince skips the middlemen and offers prices 50% less than similar brands. Step into the holiday season with layers made to feel good, look polished, and last from Quince. Perfect for gifting or keeping for yourself. Go to quince.com/KCasey for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/KateCasey to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/KateCasey.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. Today's episode begins a conversation I never expected to have. For years, I've covered the story of Nxivm, the once touted self-improvement company that unraveled into a devastating tale of manipulation, coercion, and abuse. A few weeks ago, I reached out to Nancy Salzman's attorney. Nancy, the former president of Executive Success Programs and co-founder of what would become Nxivm, served 42 months in federal prison for racketeering-related charges connected to her role in the organization. I was told she wasn't interested in interviews, and that seemed final. But on November 3rd, the morning episode 1447 aired, my interview with Natalie Rovamed, host of CBC's Uncovered series, Allison After Nxivm, I received an email from Nancy herself. She had listened to that episode, and for the first time, she was open to speaking about her experience. We spoke on the phone, and within minutes, I understood how important her perspective would be for anyone trying to make sense of this story. I started following Nxivm in 2018 in the haze of late-night newborn feedings, scrolling through articles, documents, survivor accounts, trying to understand how a group marketed as elite personal development could transform into a high-control organization that left so many lives fractured. Over the years, I've interviewed former members, some of whom I've come to know quite well. And what I've learned is this. The people who took part in ESP and Nxivm were overwhelmingly well-meaning individuals searching for growth, clarity, or community during a vulnerable moment in their lives. Keith Raniere exploited those desires with subtle, escalating manipulation. Most didn't realize they had entered a high-control group until they were deeply immersed. Some woke up years ago, others only recently, and recovery is not linear. There is no universal timeline, only a long process of reclaiming identity, rebuilding trust, and integrating the past. A commonly referenced guideline suggests that healing can take half as long as the time spent in the group. But what is certain is this. Keith Raniere stole time with family, time to pursue careers, time to become a parent, time to simply be oneself. He dismantled people's confidence and sense of self. The most compassionate thing that we can do is to truly listen, because only then can we begin to understand what survivors have endured and why rebuilding their lives takes patience, empathy, and space. I'm grateful that Nancy entrusted me with that space and with this conversation. In today's first episode of our two-part interview, Nancy Salzman discusses how she met Keith Raniere, the creation and rapid expansion of executive success programs, and what she now says was happening behind the scenes as the organization evolved. It is a complicated, often uncomfortable story, but it is essential to understand how Nxivm grew, how it operated, and how so many people were drawn in. This is part one of my conversation with Nancy Salzman. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Okay.
For the most part, I'm good. I listened to the podcast about Allison this week, so that was difficult. But no, I'm good for the most part. I'm back, in my home, and my kids live close, and I have a 4-year-old grandson who's close, and I get to spend time with him. And I have a practice, and I see people, and I get to help them, and that feels good. And, I don't have to ask for permission to go outside.
Right.
It was a long time that the whole thing went on because COVID happened in the middle of the case. And so it extended it like 2 extra years. And it's now 2025. This thing started in 2017, 18. So it's been a long time trying to get back to some semblance of normality. Like it's not normal like my past normal, it's my new normal.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be helpful to kind of go back in time. You're from New Jersey and you're one of two.
I grew up in New Jersey. Yes.
And your parents, tell me about them.
My mother was the administrator of a large temple in New Jersey, like that had 700 or 800 families.
Did she know everybody?
Not only did she know everybody, she was everybody's mother.
Oh, boy.
Everybody loved my mother.
Yeah.
My mother, was the advisor. She was the wise woman. She was the person you went to when you had a problem. And it was like a joke. The rabbi would say, they're supposed to come to me. my mother would say, I don't know why they stop off here and then they stay. Super practical. My mother was very smart. She was, she grew up, during the Depression. So she used to say, I have like a depression mentality. I'm not quite sure what that really means, except that she didn't waste a lot of things.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Like there was always so much just in case something went wrong. She worked a lot. She worked very hard. She would come home and, she would be frustrated with a lot of the people she had to work with, I think. And she would come home and sometimes take out her anger on me, or us. And I always took that very personally. And I was always trying to, keep her happy. I adored her. I thought she was great. I was jealous of all those people who thought, she was their mother.
What about your dad?
But everybody and all my friends loved my mother. Of course, they all would come and talk to my mother when there was a problem.
Yeah.
And my dad was a kind of a quiet guy. He loved sports. He was a salesman. My father could sell you anything. He was the nicest guy in the world. Everyone also loved him. But he was kind of quiet, except if he was working. When he was working, he sold men's clothing and he could sell you anything. And he had customers who just really loved him, but he loved sports. And so I remember like every Sunday he had the television, the main television, a little small television and a radio going with 3 different games. And he always a couple of guys there with him. And I was the daughter who would make everybody sandwiches or bring them coffee or drinks or whatever they wanted. And I thought my father was pretty great too. But I thought the reason that I didn't have much of a relationship with him was because of sports. And it was because he was just so preoccupied with sports. And so I married someone who hated sports. And I realized it wasn't the sports that created the problems in marriages or in relationships. It was my parents were great. They lived in New Jersey, and I moved to Connecticut at first because that's where my ex-husband, Michael, was doing residency. And we lived there for 6 years. And then we ended up in upstate New York. And he opened up a practice here, and we raised the kids here. And it was perfect for me because it was 3 hours from New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
which meant I could get home to see my folks or just go see them for a day if I wanted. But it wasn't like an everyday thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to, have an everyday mom relation. My mother and her mother were very close and they saw each other all the time, and her sister also. And I kind of liked the idea of a little distance.
Yeah.
Now I don't know why, but back then I guess I needed that space to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do with myself.
Totally. So you became a nurse at some point. So was that before or after you got married?
Oh, before. I met my husband. He was a resident while I was a student nurse.
Dude, dada.
Yeah. Yeah. I met him when I was in college, and I fixed him up with my sister immediately, thinking that they would get it off because I thought he was really quiet. And it turned out he had a great sense of humor and he was really smart. And when we double dated, I decided I liked him better than the guy I was dating.
Oh my God. Had your sister made out with him or anything?
No, they
Okay,
went
good.
out on one date, and I don't think they ever went out after that. But Michael and I became friends at first, and then we started dating, and it kind of worked. And then he was going to Connecticut 2 weeks after I graduated college to finish. I think it was his last year of residency. And I said, okay, I'll come with you. And he said, no, we'll have to get married if you're going to come with me. He was old fashioned in that way. And I was like, we don't really have to get married. And he went and talked to my parents and asked if he could ask me to marry him and if it was okay with them. And of course, they loved him.
Yeah.
He was a Jewish doctor. They adored him.
Yeah.
And he really was a nice guy. And we got engaged and we got married a few weeks after I graduated college, and we went off to Connecticut together, and he finished his residency and I was working in Waterbury, Connecticut in St. Mary's Hospital. And then after about a year, I got pregnant with Lauren, and we settled down for a while in Connecticut, and we didn't really like it there that much. And he went on a physician search organization, and they interviewed him up here. And we came up here and we really thought it would be a nice place to live. And we bought a house and we stayed. And every time I went to leave, something came up and I just stayed. So I've been here, since Lauren was 3 and Michelle was 5.
Okay. Wow.
I said that backwards. Lauren was 5 and Michelle was 2, almost 3.
And did you work the whole time when they were growing up?
Yeah. I liked work.
Mm-hmm.
I liked my work. I guess after the kids were born, I started doing private practice almost right away, working with people with chronic pain problems. My mother had a chronic pain problem. I was always very interested in it. And so I started studying non-traditional approaches to pain management. And I studied brief solution-based therapy and Ericksonian hypnosis and biofeedback. And I got a job in a chronic pain facility. And then I just started working with people who had chronic pain problems. And my practice always was very busy because I would always see the people that no one else wanted to see because they didn't know what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
They failed at medication. They failed at, pain management things. And I found that to be challenging. And also I had a lot of compassion for people in pain. And so that's what I started working with. And, I love helping people.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been the driving force. And somewhere, someone said to me in one of my Ericksonian courses, you should take neuro-linguistic programming. You should take the training. And I said, why? And he said, because it's very cool. We've all taken it. And it's non-traditional. but they have some really good ideas, and I think you'd benefit from it. And so off I went to learn NLP when the kids were little. And I thought it was fabulous. I thought it was great. I took my first course in Newtown, Pennsylvania at the, I don't remember what it's called, the Pennsylvania Institute of NLP. And through the person who was running it, her name was Linda Summer, I met Robert Dilts, who was one of the creators. And then I started studying with Richard Bandler, who was one of the creators. And I became a master practitioner, a master practitioner, and then a trainer. And then I ended up working with a guy who had a seminar company in Hawaii. And I would travel back and forth to Hawaii. But what he wanted me to do was to teach weekends called The Secret of Creating Your Future, which were 3-day weekend seminars that taught people a goal-setting technique and went through some NLP training. And then the whole idea of this was to sell his products. He had tapes and books and all kinds of things. And then to get them to sign up for a 16-day NLP training in Hawaii, where he was based. He was a guy from like Syracuse, New York, who decided if I could live anywhere in the world, where would I live? And so he decided he wanted to live in Hawaii. And he set up his NLP Institute in Hawaii and started teaching courses. And if you wanted to study NLP, why do it in Newtown, Pennsylvania, if you could do it in Hawaii?
Of course. Well, explain what NLP is for the layperson.
So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It's a blend of behavioral and cognitive psychology and formal linguistics. Richard Bandler was a mathematician, one of the creators, and the story goes, and there's all this lore of NLP, but this is how I remember it, and it may be completely wrong because it's so many years ago, but Richard was a graduate student at the University of California at Santa Cruz. John Grinder was a linguistics professor. Richard was studying some linguistics classes and editing books in the summertime for a book company. And he was editing books by Fritz Perls and Virginia Satir. Fritz Perls is like the father of Gestalt psychology. Virginia Satir is like the grandmother of family systems therapy. And he started reading the books. And what he realized was they were all the books that he was working with had lots of technique in the beginning of the book and then transcripts of people's sessions in the back of the book. Mm-hmm. And when he started looking at them linguistically, he decided that nowhere in any of the books was taught what these people were teaching in the beginning of the book. So they're teaching all this technique, but what they do in their sessions is not that. So he went to John Grinder and he said, I think we could come up with this really cool thing where we actually teach what they're doing. And so they looked at the work of Virginia Satir and Fritz Perls and also Milton Erickson. They studied Milton Erickson. Now, Milton Erickson was the person, he was a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and he studied, he actually got the AMA to accept hypnosis as a tool in modern medicine, like in 1957. And he taught a type of, what did he call it? Permissive hypnosis. So rather than, very directive hypnosis, his inductions were very permissive. Like you would just listen to him and, he would say, and you can sit here and you can hear the sound of my voice and you can hear the sound of the room. And he would do this very permissive induction and people would go into these trance states. And Erickson had chronic pain problems because he had polio as a child. And so as he got older, he had post-polio syndrome, which was very painful. So he did a lot of work with brief therapies and pain management with hypnosis. He used hypnosis for pain management. Anyway, they looked at all of this work, and what they found was that what Erickson was doing was very, very, very abstract. And what Satir and Pearls were doing were very, very, very specific in terms of their language patterns. And he said, if you want to put someone into trance, this is what their theory was, you have to be very, very abstract in what you're saying, which causes people to get very internal and go into trance states. And if you want to work with people more directly in some of these other methods, you use very direct language patterns. And so they started teaching language patterns and a number of different things, because what they were looking at, the theory was, it was the theory of modeling, that anybody who does something well should be able to teach that same thing to anybody else in less than half the time it took the first person to acquire the skill. And why that was, if I'm going to go out and learn something new, I'm going to go through a whole process of trial and error. Mm-hmm. But if I'm going to teach it to you, you don't have to go through all that trial and error. I can just teach you what works. So their whole idea was to model excellent communicators and teach people how to be an excellent communicator. And they taught an understanding of how perception works, and they taught an understanding of rapport. And they had all of these processes to teach you. If you didn't have good rapport skills, rapport is like the basis of all effective communication. So they would teach rapport in NLP, and then they would teach these language patterns that would make you very effective. And the whole idea was for you to be more effective in anything you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I thought it caught on quite a bit. But then again, I was living in an NLP world for a long time, and I became a trainer. And a lot of what I did in my career with chronic pain and those things had to do with my NLP. And I started teaching some trainings in Albany. But then some business people wanted me to teach training in their organizations. Mm. And I felt completely ill-equipped to do that. And there was this one guy, and he ran a small hospital here in Albany. And he said, I want you to train my staff. He took my NLP training. And I said, I don't work in industry. And he said to me, it's the same as what you're teaching in your little class here in this center. Why don't you want to do it in my company, my hospital? And I said, you think it's the same? And he said, it's the same. And he started bringing me books. And every week he'd bring me another business book. And he would say, I want you to read this. You can do this. You're fabulous. You're a great presenter. And I think you can do this. And I was like, and eventually he talked me into working with him. And one thing led to another and another and another. And I started teaching more than I was seeing clients. So I hired a couple of therapists to take over my practice, and I started teaching trainings. And every time I went out and I did something, I met people who then became the people who introduced me to the next thing I did, right. Who then became people. And my whole career was kind of like an accident. I think it was kind of like an accident for, a large portion of it. But once I got into industry, I kind of liked it. Mm-hmm. And in about 1998, I was working in Westchester County in an 800-bed nursing home, teaching the staff. And I met a woman whose husband worked for Con Edison. And she invited me home for dinner and wanted to introduce me to her husband because he had gone through my training materials and wanted to bring me into his division of Con Edison during deregulation. They were getting people ready for deregulation. And he ended up bringing me into Con Edison, and I ended up working in 4 divisions of the company. And finally, a senior vice president who happened to walk into one of my trainings at one point said, that woman makes sense to me. Most of these people who teach, the human resource stuff, the touchy-feely stuff. I don't like that stuff, but I like what she's saying. It makes sense. And he got chosen because he was the fixer of the company to go to the nuclear power plant when it was shut down by the NRC. And after about 2 months, he invited me to lunch. And I went to lunch with him. I really liked him. He reminded me of my grandfather. You know how when you
yeah.
when you have somebody in your life that you really love, and then you meet somebody who reminds you of them, they get all the benefit of that relationship without any of the effort, right?
Yes.
Well, it's that way with me. And I just thought he was great. And he said, I want you to come here and work with me. And I said, what do you want me to do? And he handed me a letter that was signed by Shirley Jackson. And it was it was from the NRC. And it basically said that they had a material degradation problem that was caused by human performance. And he pointed to that word, human performance. And he said, that's what you do, right? And I said, yes, Paul, I do human performance. And he said, I want you to fix it because I have to fix the company and they're not going to let us open it. And I don't like these human performance people. And I started working in this nuclear power plant the same month that someone introduced me to Keith Raniere. So my career was going in this direction of doing more and more and more business. And I had even rented an apartment in Westchester County to do this human performance thing. And I wanted to move. I wanted to get out of here, but I ended up staying because this is where we started my company.
Now, at this point, when you meet Keith, you are divorced to Michael?
Yes, I was divorced. My little organization where I had a social worker and a psychologist who were seeing the people that I wasn't seeing anymore. And one day a week, I think I would see clients because I always loved doing that. And the rest of the time I was traveling and mostly working for Con Edison because I was in multiple divisions of the company, and which consisted of me teaching big rooms full of men. Most of the people who work for Con Edison are men. And so I had rooms of like 50 or 60 men, and I was teaching these trainings. And it was challenging because I had to be funny and I had to win them over. Like what I learned when I was teaching, when I taught NLP, I didn't have to win you over. You decided you wanted to take NLP. You paid with your own money to come and take a course. And so you were motivated. These people were mandated to take my trainings.
So it's challenging.
It's challenging because they don't want to be there. I thought, this is how I went in. I went in with the belief, you're getting free training. All of my training I always paid for, and I valued it because I worked for the money and then paid for my own training. But these people were getting training for free. And I was thinking, oh, they're going to love this. This is so great. And they would come in and they'd be like, like, what have you got? And I realized if I couldn't win them over in the first 5 minutes, the entire day would be torture. And so I had to get up and be funny. I had to learn to be funny, in front of 60 men who were pissed off because they had to be in the room with me. And so somehow I figured that out. It was like everything I did had a new challenge. And I think I like that. I must be the kind of person that just...
Well, do you think it reminded you of bringing in the snacks for your dad and his friends?
Oh, I never thought of that. Maybe, I don't know. They were not like any of the people I had ever trained before. And a lot of them were engineers. So if you're working with engineer types, they're more introverted usually.
Yeah,
they're
cerebral.
And they don't know anything about the human stuff. And I do think because I was able to establish rapport very quickly with the room, and I would teach them things that were very effective tools for them to use, they liked the training. I don't think they hated the training. I think it was kind of like, oh, this is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like with the senior vice president, he came in and he watched what I did, and he watched how I did it, and he thought it was really like, this is really interesting stuff, and this is valuable. You can use this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, it made me, or it helped me become ready for my next challenge, which was building a company. I had never built a company more than, a couple of therapists and a secretary.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to build a company. And so when I first met Keith, he kind of said to me, well, you haven't really built a company. I want to work with somebody and I want to build a company. You haven't really built a company. He kind of like put me on edge, like in the very beginning, like,
Mm-hmm.
he pointed out not what I could do, but what I couldn't do. Yet at the same time, he wanted to meet me. He pursued me for a long time before I actually ended up meeting him.
Well, how did he even find out about you?
I don't know exactly, but he had another company before we created a company together, which was called CBI, Consumer Byline. And it was like a Sam's Club without the walls. It was before the Sam's Club or the BJ's thing came out. It was a catalog kind of company where they sold products and services that he negotiated, and it was a multi-level marketing company.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew very quickly from what I heard. Now, I wasn't there. I don't really know. But
That's
I
what he
know
told you. Yeah.
Yes. I met him after it fell apart and was taken apart. There were a lot of legal cases against him, which he didn't lose any of them. I don't know that he won them. I guess they were all kind of settled. But while he was building that company, he wanted to train them. He had read about NLP and he wanted someone to train them in NLP. So he sent someone to my office to enroll me in coming to meet him. And I thought it was weird.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't meet him, but one of the people who I worked with met him and gave me, not him, met the person he sent. Her name was Kristen Keefe. And he gave me Kristen's card and Keith's card and said, this guy wants you to come and train his company. Why don't you go do that? Now, remember, back then I wasn't training companies and I wasn't interested in doing it. But he pursued me. He sent people to meet me and try to get me to do it. I think he ended up getting the New York Institute to train his company, Annie Linden's company, because I said no. But then years later, he met people that I knew, and he would say to them, do you know Nancy Salzman? And they would say yes. And he would say, I really want to meet her. And, random person would come and say to me, I met Keith Raniere. He wants to meet you. And I would always just say, yeah, I heard. If he wants to meet me, why doesn't he pick up the phone and call me?
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
weird.
So weird.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Well, it could be that he was just kind of setting this tone, like, I'm a big deal. So like I have an intermediary. It's like a power move.
Yeah, I think it was in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened multiple times before he got somebody who I couldn't say no to. And then I met him.
Were you impressed with him at first?
It was kind of weird. So there was a health food store in our town that he created. It was called National Health Network.
What a weird name for a health food store.
Weird. Well, because now you have to understand Keith, because everything Keith did was very grandiose, even when it was, if it was nothing, it was going to be grandiose, right?
Got it.
So National Health Network was his next CBI, except it was before like the vitamin health food thing became like the rage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the rage. It was before that. the thing about Keith was he always knew what was the next
his finger
thing.
on the pulse. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he really did. And so he decided that he was going to create this health network where he had these stores, these health food stores, and people who were selling vitamins. And I mean, his whole shtick was he would go to companies that were just starting out that had good products, and he would negotiate exclusives with them. And then he would sell their products for cheaper than anybody else would sell them for. And so he would make money on the products. And he would have like the best vitamins, the best, green drink, the best berry drink, whatever it was. But in this case, he had this health food store. So I was at a Thanksgiving dinner with my ex-husband and his wife because we always all got together for Thanksgiving. And he met her, and her name is Sandy Salzman. And so he said, "Do you know Nancy Salzman?" And she said, "Yeah, she's my ex-wife-in-law," or whatever. She used to refer to me. And she said to me, "I want you to meet this guy, Keith Raniere." And I said, "You're like the 12th person that wants me to meet Keith Raniere, but I have no reason to want to meet Keith Raniere." And she said, "No, he's a really interesting guy." And like for the entire Thanksgiving, she was following me around saying, "I really want you to meet him. I really want you to meet him." And I was like, no, I'm not going to meet him. And finally, she looked at me and said, "I told him I'd bring you there at 1:00 tomorrow. Don't embarrass me."
Oh,
it's like that. Don't embarrass me. And I was like, "How could you tell him that?" And she said, "I know you're home. You're not traveling this weekend. The kids are here. So an hour, give me an hour."
By the way, are we dying that it's Michael's new wife is the one that actually put you in touch with him? Wow. Yes. What a wild turn of events.
And of course, she comes to my house with her car and picks me up to make sure I do it.
Wow.
And brings me and sits in on the meeting. But now listen to the meeting. The meeting is so weird.
This is like
so
wild.
I walk into a health food store, and this woman, her name is Tony, sits me down and starts selling me vitamins. And I'm like, this woman is selling me vitamins. She's making me a green drink in the blender. She's asking me questions about. Now, I never took vitamins. The last thing I was interested in was buying vitamins from anybody at this point. And she's giving me green drink to drink, which I'm looking at and thinking, what the hell
You're
is
like, that's
this?
straight on grass.
And why am I here to get a sales pitch from this woman? And there are people walking by because we're in the middle of a health food store, but there's like a little cafe in it. And we're sitting at a table and people are walking by. And there's this one guy who's really scruffy, who has long hair, stringy hair. And he's walking around in a sweatsuit and socks, no shoes.
No shoes in a health food store?
Well, he's got socks, but no shoes.
But no shoes. What?
And he's like monitoring my meeting with her. And she gets up to go get all the products that I have now agreed to buy because I can't say no. So I've got a green drink and vitamin C and CoQ10. And I've got all these vitamins now that I'm supposed to go home and take. And this guy sits down, this scruffy guy sits down across from me. And he says to me, "Tony's a really good salesperson. I see you're buying all these products." And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Really, I'm here because I'm supposed to meet this guy, Keith." And he said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I thought I was coming to meet him. And now, this whole sales thing has happened. And Sandy brought me here to meet this guy. And all of a sudden I realized I don't know who I'm talking to. And he's like laughing. And Sandy comes back over and she goes, "Hi." And she gives him a hug. And I'm like, "I didn't catch your name." And he said, "I'm Keith." And I said, and now I'm embarrassed because I'm supposed to meet this guy, Keith, and it's him. And so I don't even know why I'm there. And he says, "I've been wanting to meet you for a long time." And I said, "So I hear." And then he starts asking me a whole bunch of questions, about he had very good rapport skills, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
And he started asking me a lot of questions about like what was important to me. And he said, and you know NLP? And I said, yes. And he said, and you're teaching in industry now? And I said, yes. And he said, well, what do you teach? And I said, well, I teach the NLP communications model, and I teach them rapport skills, and I teach them skills that I think will help them with communication, you know, in the organization. And that's the way I approach my organizational work. And I said, everybody, you know, finds NLP interesting and also useful. And when people think, you know, you're giving them useful things, even in industry, they seem to be willing to spend a day with you and learn. And he said, oh, that's a good attitude. He said, you know, I have a theory. I have an idea that I want to develop. And the reason I wanted to meet you was I was looking for somebody who is interested in helping people. Like, of course, now he's already elicited my buzzwords, all my values, what's important to me. And he starts playing it back to me. Like, you know, and I say, oh, well, can I see it? And he says, well, you know, I haven't written anything down really yet. But I have this idea, and would you like to see it? Would you like to take it home and look at it, like study it? It's one piece of paper. I should go take it home now and study it and come back the next day and discuss it with him.
So he's giving you homework.
Yeah, he gave me homework.
Well, I can't get past he doesn't have shoes on in a cafe.
He was pretty scruffy at the time. He was very scruffy. He looked like everybody was sort of, was all these women and him.
All the women, all the employees are women.
Yeah, I think they were all. They were all.
Tony Natali? Was she the one?
Tony Natali was the one who sold me the vitamins. And so you know about Tony Natali.
I think I may have talked to her once. I'm trying to go back in time, but yeah.
So Tony Natali was his business partner at the time.
Okay.
And she was trying to enroll me big time. And I met Barbara Jeske at that meeting. And Karen Unterreiner was also there.
Mm-hmm.
And
was Pam there?
Oh, of course, Pam was there. Yes. Or maybe Pam wasn't there till the second meeting. But eventually, I mean, Pam was there right away, pretty soon.
So I'm assuming despite the fact he has no shoes in a cafe, which personally I couldn't get past, and you have to drink this gross grass drink, and you've got a jug of vitamins, you're probably looking around thinking, there are all of these women that are here, so maybe this is okay.
But I'm there and I'm also there with Sandy, you know, my ex-husband's wife, and she's promoting this whole thing, including, you know, she's already bought the green drink and all of the things, and she thinks I should be healthier and do these things. And I'm like, okay. Sandy and I were friends.
Wait, Sandy's still with us?
She's still married to Michael, yes.
Yeah. Has she purchased you a car or something? Because she's the one that did introduce you to him. No, Sandy owes you big time.
I don't think she ever thinks of it that way, but maybe I've thought of it. I've thought,
send me her address. I'll write her a note.
I wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for you. The other thing that's really interesting is that Kristen Keefe left. Kristen was also in and out of the health food store doing different things. She was one of Keith's people. And I vacillated between thinking this is the weirdest thing I've ever been involved in, or this might be interesting. Because he was, I mean, the whole thing seemed kind of interesting. He's very smart and he's very good at looking at you and reading you.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who was better at that than him. And then using what he sees to be convincing. And
And he's also done research on you. I mean, he's been talking to people. So for all you know, all those people that said you've got to meet Keith Raniere, he could have been asking each one of those people personal information about you that he is now using as a weapon.
Right. And he said, I'm looking for somebody to do a project with me. And I was always open to, new things, doing things. And so anyway, he gives me this piece of paper. And am I getting too much into that? He gives me this piece of paper.
That's great.
And the piece of paper was his understanding of the levels of human evolution.
Okay.
That was supposed to be the basis of a human performance model that he wanted to create with me. And so there were 9 levels. And the reason that he thought that this thing was so brilliant, and in a way it's kind of good, is because if people want to set goals, it's good to understand where you are and what you would need to do to get to the next highest level of earning or the next highest level of success in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at this, it explains different things that actually show you where you are right now and what you would have to do to become more successful in your field. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wasn't blown away by it. Later, as I began to understand how it fit in with goal setting and that we were going to create a goal setting course, a human performance goal setting class. That's what we were going to create a coaching. That was another thing. He had the whole idea of coaching before anybody was creating coaching companies.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because we did this 25 years ago. Nobody had a coaching company back then. Mm-hmm. And he came up with this. We're going to do a goal setting program and we're going to train people to be coaches and facilitators. And we're going to have these centers there could be a center. So we have nothing. We have a piece of paper and a manila folder, and he's already creating the prototype that's going to be in every city in America and then all over the world.
Mm.
And that's how he would think that you and I are going to create this prototype. So everything I did was with reproduction, to reproduce this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, he said, everything you do has to be measurable, quantifiable, reproducible, and consistent. It has to meet the tenets of science. And so I was like, okay, that sounds like a great idea to me. I've never been able to build a big business. That's great. If you can teach me how to build a big business, that would be great. I wouldn't mind that. My own company, that's a cool idea. How we got to what I just said was, he said to me, do you know what makes something a science? And I said, no, what makes it a science? And he said, it has to be reproducible, consistent, verifiable, and quantifiable. That's it. And I said, that's it? And he said, yeah, that's it. And he said, so everything you do has to be teachable to someone else because it has to be reproducible.
Mm.
And he said, so the reason I need you to do this work with me is because I can't do it. I have to teach it to you and you have to do it. In other words,
mm-hmm.
if I do it, it's not reproducible. But if you do it, you're the tool.
Right.
For me.
Mm-hmm.
So we will come up with all of these things, and then everything you do has to be reproducible because you are actually trying to be me. You are trying to reproduce me.
Was there a cellular part of you in that moment that thought, this doesn't sound right?
It wasn't one conversation.
Okay.
He got me over a series of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So Keith he doesn't like go for the close right away. What he'll do is
he plays the long game.
Yes, he does. And he'll get little agreements along the way. And before you know it, you've agreed to more than you ever meant to agree to, because you're in pretty deeply at that point.
It's almost like instead of always be closing, he's always be negotiating.
Always. Always. And you can't imagine how good he was.
Yeah.
He was really effective.
Let me ask you this. In those beginning days, he's putting all the work onto you. You have to build this. Has anything that you've said about yourself personally to him, has he begun to twist it and to use it as a weapon?
Well, he knew that I was divorced and he knew that I was lonely.
Mm.
And so he said to me, you should not get into another relationship until you work your relationship issues.
Now, you imagine a business partner in the year 2025 saying this to a colleague is bananas.
No, but he was the coach. He was demonstrating being the coach, mentor, person. And he was saying to me, you need to get through your relationship problems. And this is important for you in your life to get through your relationship issues. And I felt...
By the way, at this point, you're friends with your ex-husband and his new wife. I think that you were doing pretty fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a good relationship. After we divorced, we didn't have problems. We spent time together.
This is like conscious uncoupling before it became a thing from Gwyneth Paltrow. And he's telling you, you need to work on your relationship issue.
Because you feel like, you need to have a man in your life, and, you don't.
But you're an alpha. So why do you need a man?
Well, I'm not an alpha to Keith. To Keith, he's the alpha, and I'm,
right.
the beta.
Do you think he's trying to convince you all the time that you're a beta?
Yes, he constantly... I'm a hard worker.
Yeah.
And I don't mind work. I like work. And I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, but maybe I am a little bit. Like, I work hard and I want to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what bar I reached, he raised it. I could never reach the bar with Keith. He was always just raising the bar or showing me how I wasn't cutting it, really. And he never, ever gave me a compliment or told me I did a good job unless he was presenting in front of people and somehow it made him look better. In retrospect, I realized this. I always felt like I just couldn't ever reach his expectation of me. And I just worked harder and harder and harder. He was very controlling a lot of the time we were working together. And I think the people who now continue to feel loyal to Keith were not close to him when we had the company and didn't experience
probably,
him being really controlling and the way that he treated the people who were the closest to him.
Mm-hmm.
So to them, like, they say things like, well, I've never had bad experience with Keith. They say this to me. They come to me and say to me, well, if you could just remember what it was like when you were in the company with Keith, you would go back to feeling the way you used to feel about him. Because, and then I would say, but you weren't close to him. You don't know what it was like. And
Mm-hmm.
they would say to me, I never had a bad experience with him. Well, you never had any experience with him, is what I want to say. Like,
mm-hmm.
But I don't want to convince anybody that Keith is a bad person. It's not my job. And I don't need to do that, but I'm not going to lie about my relationships and my relationship with him or what it was like. And, as time went on, it became less and less pleasant for me. And, at a certain point when he left the country, I thought I would miss him. And I was very sad to realize that after 3 weeks of him being away and not contacting me or talking to me, going from talking to me every single day to just no communication, all I could say that I felt was relief. We were a coaching organization, but he would slip things in like, he would say things like, I don't need very much sleep. And he would say to me, you don't need more than, 3 or 4 hours of sleep. If you think you need more sleep than that, you're being indulgent. And he would make comments like I was being indulgent if I got too much sleep. The whole 20 years we were in business together, I never took a vacation. There was never a vacation. If we talked about vacation, Keith would say, what do you mean you need a vacation? What are you going to do? Vacate your life? This is your life. This is your work. This is your life. You don't vacate your life. And when Pam got sick, she wanted to go to Fiji. Claire bought property in Fiji, and everybody wanted to go to Fiji. And so Pam asked us all to go to Fiji with her because she wasn't well. And she wanted to go, and she wanted us there with her because we were all, her friends. And so we went. And even when we were there, I was working. Like I had my computer and I could still write. I wrote about 1,500 2-hour modules in the time I knew Keith. I have a mountain of curriculum that I created. I would write curriculum. So in the beginning, I started writing the curriculum. I needed to make a reproducible model because what we were saying is we're going to create these centers. So in the beginning, I would write facilitator notes and try to train the facilitators, but it was difficult to train the facilitators quickly enough to make it reproducible fast enough. So I ended up filming modules that went with these notes that I printed up. So I was the person in the modules. I wrote the modules. I wrote the curriculum. I trained the people who took the training, the coaches, and the higher level people. So I did all the training, all in the beginning of the company. I did all the training, all the writing of the curriculum. I made the modules. And I went out and trained all the people in the outlying areas. So I was traveling about 50% of the time, developing teams of people in all the outlying areas when they wanted to create a new center. So I was in charge of doing all of those things. Plus all of the executive staff were my coachees. So I was coaching the executive staff of the company. Now, in the beginning, I was on the executive board, but he created a new executive board in 2009 and told me that he didn't want me on the executive board.
And why was that?
He found me problematic. He didn't want me to be on the executive board. He said, well, you're the president of the company. I want to make a distinction here. This is an important piece for me that I want to say in our podcast, if it's okay, because I just listened to Allison's podcast and I've listened to other podcasts about us and I've listened to people talk about us. My company was Executive Success Programs. Nxivm was a name he created later that he called an umbrella. Yes. So my company was called Executive Success Programs. That was my responsibility. I also wrote curriculum for Jeunesse, which was a women's organization. So those two companies I wrote the curriculum for, and I trained people, and I did trainings in both of those. There were other companies that were created under what we called the Nxivm umbrella. They also had names, but there wasn't one company called Nxivm.
That's helpful to know.
Then he created the sorority, is what I was told it was when I finally was told about it. DOS, the thing that created the problems, the thing that Allison is talking about in hers, which I was not privy to. There were about 100 or 125 women who were involved in that from beginning to end. My company educated 18,000 people. We didn't have problems in my company. We didn't have branding or any of the things you saw on television. That was not my company. However, the media exaggerated this women's organization. So it was like my company, the one that did the coaching and had different centers all over the place, was called Executive Success Programs, or ESP. Then this other thing was created. It wasn't a company, whatever it was, a sorority, whatever it was, that all the problems happened in. They called the Nxivm sex cult. But they didn't differentiate between my company and that. So a lot of the people who were very happy with my company, we didn't have complaints about my company. We had a very good product, and people were happy with it. They made changes. They were able to learn the things they needed to learn to be more effective. It was a good curriculum. We had a money back guarantee. Nobody ever asked for their money back.
So the men's group, that was also another side project that he had created.
Yeah. Okay. That was not part of my company. I was not involved in that. I took the training, but I was not involved in it. I took it because I always wanted to know what they were doing. But
also, talk a little bit about when you first kind of established ESP and how the finances would work, because it sounded to me like he had just convinced you to just take what you need in the beginning.
And what he said to me was, this is your company. Figure out what you need to survive and just take that. Because it's your company. You don't want to be draining the company with a high salary. You don't need anything you need, you can take care of. So I figured out what my expenses were, and I had a lower salary than anybody, pretty much. The people who made most of the money in my company were either head trainers, field trainers. A field trainer was somebody who oversaw salespeople and was a salesperson. Like Sarah Edmondson was a field trainer. Mark Vicente was a field trainer. They were partners and they had centers together. And so they made money from everything that went on in their center. So the field trainers actually made the most money in my company. The salespeople made more money than anybody. The head trainers made less money, even though they were important. The way that the money was distributed, 30% went to sales, 30% went to delivering the product, and into delivering the product was the head trainer's fee. So a lot more money went into sales than went into almost anything, because Keith always explained that salespeople were more valuable to a company than almost anything. Because if you had a product, it didn't matter how good it was if you couldn't sell it.
Did you ever have conversations about renegotiating the deal, or like the company structure or finances?
For myself? Whenever I asked for more, whenever I said I'm going to take more money, I had to justify it to him in some way, or he wanted me to justify it to him. Like, I couldn't go to our controller and say, look, I want you to give me a raise. I want you to give me this much money. she would say, have you checked it with Keith? Like everything went through Keith in my company.
Even though it's your company. Wow.
And I mean, I worked until I dropped every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that because I didn't like my work or I feel badly about it. I loved my work. So it wasn't even a problem for me, but that's just how I worked. Like I remember I'd be teaching trainings. And when I would teach trainings, people would come from all of our outlying areas to Albany to take these high level trainings. And while they were there, if they were like on our executive staff or they were high level students or people who worked for us, they would say to me, I have this problem and I haven't been able to deal with it. Will you help me with it? Because they would want me to work with them directly. And I would say, of course. I mean, I loved the people in my company. I would say, of course. And I would say, come over, like after training tonight, come over and I'll work with you. And I would be falling asleep because I'd be up, at the crack of dawn, meeting with Keith, talking about what we were going to teach that day, writing the curriculum all day and teaching it. And then I would have people come at night to do sessions with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be sitting there. And I used to remember, this is what it was like. I would feel myself falling asleep and feel guilty because I didn't have enough energy to finish the session. And I never wanted to call attention to the fact that I was tired or make them feel bad. And at one point, I remember I said to somebody, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. Like I'm apologizing for being tired after the kind of day I've had, like an 18-hour day. I'm apologizing. And the person says to me, and I said, sometimes, I think I fall asleep in the middle of, working with somebody. And this person looked at me and said, we know that. We all talk about it. We just want you to get to the end of the session because we want our time with you. But that's the way they talked. It was like, please don't fall asleep in the middle of my session. Just finish it so that I can get my time with you. And I just thought that was kind of funny, but not,
It's the sleep, it's the check-ins, and then it's also how much you can eat.
I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but he wanted me to call him first thing in the morning when I woke up. I was a runner. So I just wanted to wake up, have a cup of coffee, get on the treadmill, do my miles, take my shower, and then work. But he often wanted to come to breakfast at my house, have me make him breakfast so he could tell me whatever he wanted to tell me for the day. So he wanted me to call him first thing in the morning before I did anything. This was always like a bone of contention for me because really I didn't want to. But it was part of the control thing that he would do where if I didn't do that, then, there'd be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get up and I would call him before I would run. And if he wanted breakfast, I had to make him breakfast before I could go do my run. So I found that very controlling.
Mm-hmm.
He liked women to be thin. The people who were in his orbit, most of the women were pretty thin. I'm not thin like that. I've never been thin like that. I've also never had that desire to be super thin. I'm not big by any means. I was a size 2 when I was running my company, 2 or 4. I mean, I'm small, but not small like he liked. He liked really skinny women. Mm-hmm. So I was like, like 120 pounds. I'm 5'4", and that I don't think I was ever more than 125 the whole time I ran my company. And he wanted me to lose weight. I mean, he wanted me to lose weight, but he wouldn't push the point with me because that was a place where I just said no, because I wasn't going to diet and have the kind of life I had. It was too hard. I mean, I never got fat. I never gained a lot of weight, but he would say to me, well, maybe you'll lose the weight. Like somehow I was this big fat slob walking around being a problem. So yeah, he really wanted people to be thin. He didn't really push me on that point because, and I'm not sure why, except at one point, it was one of the only things I ever stood up to him about.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't stand up to him about many things because at one point, I remember I think I questioned something that he was doing, and he basically threatened that if I had no right, he would say this, that like I didn't understand how he worked with people, and it was none of my business. And if I ever questioned him about how he worked with people, I would never see him again.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my great guest, Nancy Salzman, and remind you to make sure that you click subscribe. Please make sure that you check for part 2 to tomorrow. And also, you can join the Facebook group, Reality Life with Kate Casey. I would hope that you come and join us in a conversation. And then also make sure you subscribe to my What to Watch list, which is my weekly list of what to watch in unscripted TV, so you can learn about more documentaries and reality shows by going to katecasey.substack.com. And make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KatecaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, and Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at Katecasey. Again, make sure you check back tomorrow for part 2.